All right, we'll go in. Okay, so now this one is going to be a visual aid style. Now, it's not a part of our quote-unquote living faith material, but what I'm wanting you to do is take what I'm going to show you here and understand the philosophy of discipleship. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Every person on this planet gets discipled. It's just who disciples you. You're either going to be discipled by the world, you're going to get discipled by a certain way, by a certain church. Your parents are going to disciple. Everybody gets discipled. The problem becomes when we're not getting biblical discipleship. And we're going to lay this out. I'm going to ask for some volunteers to come up and wear some T-shirts. But what we're calling this is understanding our biblical call to the discipleship. And I want you to be able to, and what you're going to find out, I'm going to lay this out. It took me about 7 weeks in our church to do it. But I'm going to kind of give you the overview of it here today. And it will literally change how you view the book of Proverbs. And hopefully, if I do my job, when we get done, you're going to find out the first discipleship book wasn't those 18 lessons. It's the book of Proverbs. And you're going to start to realize all those things that Solomon's spitting out, those life practical things, wow, that is discipleship. That's what I'm trying to instill into somebody. And one of the things that we do at our church with the book of Proverbs is we challenge our people to read the book of Proverbs every month. In other words, today is the 17th? 18th? Okay. All right. So what we would want you to do is read that chapter of Proverbs. There's 31 chapters, and you can just go down through here. And guys, it doesn't take very long at all. And I'm not telling you to stop your other reading, but you can get through that and then just highlight stuff that God's hitting you with and watch how practical the Bible becomes to your daily life. But I'm going to lay this out, and you're going to find out discipleship is not some new thing that started when Jesus hit this planet. He took it to the next level, but discipleship has been around the whole time, okay? And so we'll look at that, and that's kind of my point of there. So Psalms 19 is where we start, and he says, "The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure," and he says, "making wise the simple." Okay? And so our goal in discipleship is to get wisdom, not knowledge. Knowledge is a part of it, but the goal is wisdom into the simple. And how we understand Psalms 19 is through the book of Proverbs. Okay? And so the book of Proverbs is going to speak about 5 specific people. All right? You're going to see the simple one, the prudent man, the scorner, the fool, and the wise man. Understand, 172 verses deal directly with this paradigm. And once you start to see how this lays out, man, you are really going to start to look at this whole thing of real. I don't know about you, but sometimes you almost think that the book of Proverbs was like Solomon's tweets. Just 140 character thought bombs. You know what I'm talking about? When you look at somebody's tweet and you're going, what does that mean? They just throw out this quote. Well, some of the book of Proverbs sounds like that until you start to realize, oh, there is a method to the madness here. Okay? And so that's what I'm going to do is start with the simple one. I want you to come up and wear this shirt. Put the shirt on, and I want you to notice that it just says simple. He's going to put that shirt on. He's going to take a seat there. And the reason I want to use him is because the word simple, now, in years past, many people used the term simple to refer to somebody that was maybe mentally handicapped or something like that, or somebody that's some country bumpkin that never really learned anything, and he's just a simple individual. The word simple that God uses in the book of Proverbs gives you a picture word like a blank sheet of paper. Okay? Instead of using a piece of paper, we're going to use a white t-shirt. And notice that nothing is written on his shirt yet. He is somebody that, it doesn't mean he's evil, it doesn't mean he's good, it doesn't mean he knows a lot, he doesn't know much. He just hasn't had much taught to him yet. Now, understand, I'm using one of the youngest people, I think the youngest guy in here. Now, the purpose I'm doing this is because hopefully when we're discipling people, we're catching them at a young age, training them. But understand, you could be 85 in a church and still be a simple one, that you just never learned anything. Okay? And so our job, because nothing has been written on here, is to make sure we get to Him before these guys do. Because given a few years to pass by, and his piece of paper ain't going to be blank anymore. Stuff's going to start getting wrote on the t-shirt. All right? He's a simple one, and we're going to talk about what the Bible talks about a simple one. Number one, he's a blank sheet of paper. All right? He's void of understanding. That doesn't mean he's not capable of understanding. He's just void of it. He's just never been taught anything. Okay? Understand that when it comes to the Bible and the people in our churches, that the vast majority of people fit in this category. It's not that they can't learn. It's just nobody's ever taught them. And we, because we got problems in our churches, we go about this almost like everybody knows what we know. What, you don't know that? Well, remember, there was a day you didn't know that, okay? And as we grow, our purpose is to take this simple guy and lead him in the right direction. Remember, Psalms 19, make wise... Wait, I'm backwards here. I'm sorry. I'm normally on that side doing this, so let's make wise the simple. Psalms 19. My job is to lead this guy into the land of wisdom. If I'm not careful, if I don't do my job as a discipler, he's going to end up in the land of a fool. Okay? Now, so not only is he void of understanding, he's gullible. He believes every word. He lacks insight. Doesn't mean he's, and I'm going to use the word, it doesn't mean he's stupid. He lacks insight. He hasn't seen some of the stuff that has been showed to you and I. Easily deceived. Okay? Remember when I was talking about in Ephesians that they're blown about with every wind of doctrine? Okay? That's what happens. Now, Proverbs 7:7. And beheld among the simple ones, I discerned among the youth a young man void of understanding. Okay? Now, the vast majority, you understand the word teenager was coined in about the 1950s. Actually, the Bible word for a teenager is young man. Right? Now, Jay's going to, you're dealing with the 7 levels of growth. But young man is a word that is designed by the Bible to teach you something. It's a man, it's a young man. He has a youth mind, but he's getting a man's body. Right? You take my son, he was here last night. He's 16 years old, plays baseball. He's starting to develop. You know, he likes to take his shirt off, flex a little bit. He's starting to get a man's body, but he's still a youth. He's still a child. Okay? That's what a young man is. Now, remember, I'm describing a physical young man, but remember, we're talking about spirituality here. You may be in the church, and you may be 50 years old, and you may even served in the church, but you may still be a young man. Jay will deal with all that tomorrow. But understand, our job is to realize his situation is he's void of understanding. Okay? Now, number 2, the simple, Proverbs 14:15, believeth every word. They're gullible. Now, one of the things that make us as Living Faith who we are is we are dispensationalists. Okay? We've even had conferences on this. We are anti-Reformed theology. We do not believe that somebody is chosen for hell and somebody is chosen for heaven predetermined. We believe that everyone who's ever had breath in their life, God died for you. And we believe that our job is to reach all of them. Okay? And it's not this, well, it's this elected, they're going and they're not, and this tulip thing. So and the reason I'm bringing that up is if we don't do our job, guess who's going to? Those guys are going to come along and start teaching the simple one, a guy who's saved, he loves Jesus, he's void of understanding, but he's gullible. And all of a sudden somebody pulls out some Bible verses out of context and says, see there, Romans 9, God lets you know He'll have mercy on who He wants to. Oh, I guess that's right. And now all of a sudden he's off. There's a case of a guy I know, his son-in-law, grew up Baptist, dispensational, ended up in the Reform world, realized one day that was garbage, now he's an atheist. Blown about with every wind of doctrine. Now, I don't believe in any real true atheist. I think you were designed with a God-sized hole in you, and we were designed that way. I think it's a way of blocking out your conscience, but that's a whole nother story. So we're talking about gullible, right? All right. Number 2, Proverbs 22, verse 3. This is the third point we're looking at. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Do you know what these guys are known for? Running right into danger. Let's just look at this as a child. Okay? Kid, ball rolls out in the street. What do? Look out! Don't run in the street. Why? He's just void of understanding. He lacks insight. He doesn't comprehend, hey, if I run out in the street and give this ball, that car is going to hit me. Okay? Once again, a little child, we understand it. But remember, we're talking about spiritual parenting here. We're talking about growing people. We have a young man who's not dumb by any means. He just lacks insight. He's just not that far down the road. I try to use this as an example on a regular basis in our church. If I look at you and say, hey, we need to run up here to Chattanooga, and I get out here on 75 and I take off, and about an hour later, James, he's going to Chattanooga, he's just running a little bit behind, and I call James and say, hey, don't go up 75. There's a bad wreck up here in Recyca, and man, you need to avoid this. That doesn't mean I'm smarter than James. I'm just a little further down the road than James. Understand, he hadn't left for Chattanooga yet. Okay? And so my job is to make sure I look out for him. Okay? We'll get to the whole layout here and just say, Romans 16:17 says, I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause division and offenses contrary to doctrine. That's why I have no problems calling out Reformed theology. God clearly says, mark them that are causing division, specifically when it's contrary to doctrine. And he says, which ye have learned, avoid them. For they that are such serve not our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly. By good words, fair speeches, they deceive the hearts of the simple. That's what happens. I told you in the last session, the Jehovah's Witness, what does he do? Knocks on the door. Through good words and fair speeches, he deceives the heart of the simple. So the problem is there's nothing wrong with being a simple one. The problem is when you stay a simple one. You know, we have no problem with a child at 4 being a 4-year-old. We get it, you're a 4-year-old. Now, if you're 14 and you're still acting like a 4-year-old, there's a problem. Okay? We haven't raised you right. We messed up somewhere in your raising. Now, let's talk about the prudent man. Okay? I'll give the Alabama guy. He's wearing the shirt, but we'll let him be the prudent man. I'm going to save the Ohio guy for later. So this is a prudent man. So the deal is, this guy is called the prudent man. Literally what you're going to find out is he's a discipler. God says, man, I got a simple man here, and his problem is he's gullible, he's easily deceived, he lacks insight. What he needs more than anything is a guide. Someone to come along his side and say, let me show you some things. Let me show you how to do that. Let me teach you some things. And so what we have is God has called us to be prudent men. And you're going to find out. Remember, the goal has never changed. Our goal is to take this guy here, the simple man, and bring him down to being a wise man, right? Okay, so he's the prudent man. Let's look at him. He looks after the simple. That's this guy. Conceals knowledge. I remember when I read that, I thought, wait a minute, I thought our job was to get them knowledge. Well, I'll come back to that. All right? He foresees evil. He looks down the road and sees what's coming. He covers shame. You're starting to see your job as a discipler here. Okay? Regards reproof. I can go to this guy and correct him, and he's okay with it. People who walk with Jesus don't mind being corrected. It's the people over here that have a problem with that. Now, he gets knowledge. Listen, I understand all of us want to be disciplers. Understand you never stop being discipled. I'm 45. I've been saved for 25 years. I'm pastoring a church, and I'm constantly trying to learn. I look at the other pastors that are in this group, and I'm constantly trying to ask them, how'd this go? How'd that go? I was in here talking to James about the transition between James and Joe in this church, and I want to know about those things. He said, well, why? I don't know. Maybe that happens to me one day. I want to know the inside of how that went down. I'm constantly wanting to be a learner of Christ. Now, Proverbs 14:15 says, the simple, that's this guy, believes every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. Okay, this is his job as a discipler, because I know he will believe every word. then my job as a prudent man here is to make sure I look well after him. Because if I don't, next thing I know, he is buying into that Reformed theology thing. He is believing in that speaking in tongue thing. Or he's believing in that losing your salvation thing. Or believing in that, Christ wasn't really God in human flesh thing. Okay? So my job is to make sure he doesn't get taken out. That's your job as a discipler. It's not to get people through 18 lessons. It's to be a guide. It's to be looking out after somebody. It's to be a watchman, okay? Now, Proverbs 12:23. A prudent man concealeth knowledge. Now this is, when I was first studying this, I was really struggling with this verse because I'm thinking, wait a minute, I thought my job was to get him knowledge. Well, it is, but certain knowledge. So going back to what James mentioned last night about the 4 goals. So the 4 goals has always been establish your discipler in the Word of God. And that's where we start, right? Okay, I started to struggle with that a little bit because what I started noticing in Kelly Harbin is we'd get the new people in, we'd get them established in the Word, and it wasn't long they were a bunch of puffed up jerks. Oh man, I know everything. Look at how much we know and they don't know at that church. Well, that's not the intent. Okay? One of the things we do at our church, we do church history. I did it on Wednesday nights, and took almost 2.5 years on Wednesday nights to take you through 73 lessons on church history. Then I turned around and did it again a few years ago on Thursday nights to a group of people that were new to our church. And in taking you through church history, we take you down the road of Revelations 2 and 3, and man, we show where everything comes from. We show you the history behind Christmas and Saturnalia, where a Christmas tree origin is. We take you down the road of man, I'm going to teach you where Easter comes from and Istar and all that other stuff, right? And every year when I teach this, I have a picture of my house. My wife is a Christmas tree freak, right? We bought a house, or she did, based on a 20-foot ceiling when you walk in so that she can put a 15-foot Christmas tree. I'm not kidding you. Swing by the house around Christmas. You'll see it. All right? Everywhere we go and she buys Christmas ornaments. We were last year in Israel with Living Faith, and we go to Bethlehem, and what are we going to do in Bethlehem? We're getting Christmas ornaments from the birth of Christmas. I mean, we're going here. So, I teach this, and I always tell people, guys, I'm just giving you the knowledge. Just, we're not telling you don't have Christmas. Make sure if you're going to have it, make it about Jesus. Okay? This guy I was teaching takes this knowledge and messes his whole family up. We're not having Christmas. We're not having Easter. We're not having any of that stuff. You're not celebrating all that. And just messed his whole family up. I felt terrible. And I started to realize, whoa, my job as a prudent man is to make sure that this guy here is a simple man is not getting every amount of knowledge I have. I'm going to ease him along the road to get him what he needs. And if I had it over to do again, I wouldn't have taught that guy some of that stuff. He wasn't ready for it. He couldn't handle it. The people who have been established in the Word can handle it. So when going back to what James is talking about last night, let's establish them first in worship. That was the design anyway, guys. We were created to be eternal worshipers. So let's start by establishing you in worshiping God. Let's start you with the virtue according to Peter. Then we'll add some knowledge. And when we start adding the knowledge, we're going to be careful what knowledge we give you. And as you grow in your steps, think about it. You don't go into first grade and they go, all right, you need some knowledge. So we're going to open up your trigonometry books. I can't even say it, let alone teach it. And we're going to teach you trigonometry here in the first grade. Well, nobody does that. We do it in our churches. And you know why? Because that book is really cool, and there's some really cool stuff in that book. And what we want to do at times is woo and wow the simple guy with all how awesome God is, and He is. But here's what I found out, guys. In 25 years of serving Jesus, I've studied some really deep stuff, but I get into Galatians and it says, walk in the Spirit that you not fulfill the lust of the flesh, and that one throws me for a loop. I can't figure that one out. I can go over here and study all these deep, in-depth stuff, but the hardest thing in my life to do is figure out how am I going to get up today and not serve the flesh and make sure I serve Jesus. Now, if you can figure that out and that comes easy to you, you probably need to be the one here and let me sit down, because I have found the hardest thing in my Christian life is to do what I know I need to do. I'm not bothered by what I don't know about the Bible. I'm bothered what I do know about the Bible and am not living at times. All right? So the goal is to retain some of the knowledge. Hold it back from this simple guy. All right? Conceal it. Number 2, the prudent man foresees the evil and hideth himself from it, but the simple pass it on and punish it. Okay, this guy was at one time a simple one, but he has learned and he realizes, man, I can't cross the street going after that ball because that car is going to hit me. Okay, I have to look both ways when I cross the road. These are all just elementary things, but guys, think about it. We learned them at one point, and this guy's problem is he hadn't learned them yet. And so his job, just like you're going to walk up to a light with your child, and you got him by the hand, you say, hey, now we look both ways when we cross the road. Well, it seems elementary for us that know it, but for the individual that doesn't know it, we got to just keep instilling that. And how many times do you tell that kid? Yeah, every time. Hey, look, both ways. What's a one-way street? Don't trust people. Right? Look both ways every time. Right? So the bottom line is, he foresees evil. He can look down the road and see it coming. And that's what a discipler is. And there are going to be times that you're going to be sitting at a Starbucks discipling somebody, and they're talking about their life, and you can see what's coming ahead. And you have to warn them. Now, I also will tell you how many times as parents have we seen evil come into our kids, and we had to allow it to come. There's a situation with my daughter, and my wife wanted to tell her what was fixing to happen. My wife had been telling her, hey, I need you to do this. And my daughter kept saying, no, I don't think that's right. No, and she was trying to give her spiritual advice on a situation of a guy she was dating in her life, and she wouldn't listen to her mom. Well, we got wind that he was going to be breaking up with her. She wanted me to go tell her. I said, no. Had she listened to you, she wouldn't be in this mess. And so we knew she was fixing to get hurt and had to stand there and take it and watch it. And so when we got in the vehicle one night, me and her were going to a class I was teaching, and it's my oldest daughter, and we're sitting over here. And I said, hey, did your mom tell you to do this? Yeah. Did you listen to her? No. Then the lesson we just learned is maybe the next time your mom talks, you might want to listen. Right? Now, do you think she listens to me if she wouldn't have went through the pain? No. The pain is what caused her to listen. It's no different than sometimes we allow the kid to reach out and touch something that's going to hurt. Hey, don't do that again. All right? Well, his job is to foresee evil. And there's times that as a discipler, you have to allow them to just fall on their face so that you can go, hey, you see why you don't do that now? Okay, now get back up on your feet and we'll help you. All right? Now, number 2, or whatever number we're on here, the next verse, Proverbs 12:16. A fool's wrath is presently known. By the way, have you noticed a lot of the verses that I'm reading, it has these guys, other ones listed? Because this dynamic is tied throughout the whole book. A fool's wrath is presently known, but a prudent man covereth shame. Right? Okay, your job as a discipler in our churches is not to shame the person you're discipling. Matter of fact, if we're doing a good job at discipling, we find out about the problems and we make sure it's taken care of before it becomes public. Because think about how many people have been hurt in church because they messed up and it became a church-wide event, and it's embarrassing and you're going, I don't want to come back to that. I mean, and rightfully so. I don't want to be embarrassed in front of everybody else. But at the end of the day, if this guy does something wrong, his job is to cover that, not to openly shame him. All right? So the job that you have as a discipler is not just teaching him a lesson, it's to help guide and cover. That doesn't mean you're hiding sin. That's not what we're talking about. You deal with the sin, but you deal with it in such a way it's hidden. I can't tell you how many times that I've sat in my office with people in our church who got in a mess and nobody else in the church knew about it except me and that person. And it's nobody else's business. As long as we can correct them and get them right, that's the goal. But why shame them and they end up gone? What purpose of that is? When I disciplined my kids, for the most part, I tried to do it in private. Because I wasn't about embarrassing them. Right? It was something I wanted to do. My son used to get taken out of church and walked outside, and we handled the deal and walked back in. Right? Well, he needed to be disciplined, but I didn't feel like it was proper to do that in front of everybody else. Okay, well, it's the same dynamic here. Okay, now, Proverbs 15:5. A fool despiseth his father's instructions, but he that regardeth reproof is prudent. Here's one of the things you're going to find out as a discipler. You haven't learned it all. And there are going to still be discipling going on in your own personal life, and there's still going to be people who come along from this seat over here and correct you. And if you're walking with God, you regard that. You're like, yes, I want to know when I'm outside of the lines of God's will so that I can be corrected. Bottom line is, you remember David? He gets told, hey man, a guy took this one sheep. This is the guy's only sheep. David's like, who's the man? We're going to kill him. You the man. Right? Now, David at the moment probably didn't like it, but if you realize, David actually came to his senses and realized, yep, you're right, it's me. And the bottom line is, a guy who's a prudent man, if you're going to be a discipler, you're going to be sitting here. Now, Proverbs 18:15. The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. Okay? The goal here is to get more knowledge. As a prudent man, you never stop learning. That's one of the things that's awesome about this conference. Man, I really appreciate Oakland Heights doing this. And the reason being is, every year we have this discipleship thing. It kind of gives me a spark to really go, yeah, I need to get back into that better. I need to do that more. I need to be more about discipleship. And every year I come to this, I'm learning something. There's never been a year I went, I knew all that. Oh, I got all that down. No. You're constantly relearning it, reaffirming it, trying to grow more into it. Listen, I hope that you're that way in everything you do in life, but specifically in discipleship. He's wanting to get knowledge. Okay, so let's talk about the scorner. Hi, Jay. Come on up. Come on down. It's that beard.
I think the beard should be the wise man.
I like the beard thing. When James started growing his out, is when I decided I wanted to be like James and go from there. So this guy is the scorner. Now here is the thing that you need to understand about Jay as the scorner. He's a discipler. His job is to come and disciple this guy. And what happens is, if Alabama here, if Alabama doesn't come and disciple this guy, Jay will. He'll come up and say, oh, I got this. I'll write on his shirt for him. And let's look at, number one, this guy won't listen. He hates reproving. He's proud. He's haughty. He delights in disobedience. He can't gain wisdom. You can't take a guy from here and get him into the land of wisdom. Okay? There's all kinds of problems with this guy. He's a scoffer. He mocks. You ever seen the people in church that, yeah, they're going to have discipleship. Well, you can mark it down right now. That's a scoffer. That's this scorner guy. Right? I mean, this is who this guy is. Now, let's get into this guy. Proverbs 13:1. A wise son heareth his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. He's not going to listen. No matter what you do. You're going to find out we're to openly rebuke these guys. And the reason is because they don't listen. Right? Now, a scorner loveth one that reproveth him. A scorner loveth not the one that reproveth him. Neither will he go on to the wise. He hates reproving. He does not want to be corrected. By the way, what I'm trying to show you is, you can find out where a guy is in life a lot of times. Remember, this guy loves to be reproved. This guy can't stand it. So a lot of times in my church, I can tell where you are spiritually just by how you handle the reproving. If it's a guy who accepts the criticism, constructive criticism, and wants to fix that, I know where he's at. If it's a guy who bucks against the system and rebels, and I know what he is too. Okay, now check this out. This guy here is a simple one. Our goal is to reach him why he's simple and he has nothing on his shirt, right? He's a blank piece of paper. Here's what I found out about the ministry of discipleship in Kelly Harbin. The vast majority of the people we have some stuff written on their shirt already by this guy. And our first job, before we can even get to writing the right stuff on his shirt, is we have to come along with some spiritual bleach and clean off some stuff. And most of what we have found, because we are in the South, we are in the Bible Belt, the biggest thing we struggle with is tradition. That guys like him having, because you think of this guy and you think he's some bum off the side of the street. No. This guy's sitting on your pew. He's right in the midst of all this stuff. This is the guy that creates all the splits in your church. Okay, this guy comes along and says, "You don't need that stuff. Man, you listen to me, son. We never did that back in my day." Or, "Oh, we've always done it that way around here." Well, we don't do it like that at this church. I mean, you've heard these words, right? So what happens is this guy's first job is to come along a lot of times and wipe off all that tradition, wipe off all that goofiness, and says, "Okay, now that you've gotten down to a clean sheet of paper, now let's start afresh." Now, so we're talking about Jay as a scorner here. All right? He's proud, he's haughty. A scorner is his name. You can watch it, pride. You can see it, guys. In your church, you'll see the people who are the scorners. Prideful. You just can't seem to get them to humble themselves. Now, guys, I can tell you this much. Humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, and He will exalt you. Okay? This guy's never going to be exalted. He can't humble himself. He's proud. And his job, and this is what happens. We all think, "Well, I'm just not into that discipleship thing, man. I'm just not into it. I'm glad you guys are. I'm glad somebody is. But that's just really not for me." Well, do you understand why you sit and do nothing? This guy is steadily at work. And if Prudent doesn't do his job, he'll be glad to do it for him. He'll come along and say, "Oh, I got it." And what happens is we end up with issues in churches, and we end up with kids that end up out. All right, so we're dealing, I'm 45, I'm kind of right there in the middle, but I've watched my own generation leave church. And the reason being is they've dealt like this. And what he's done is drawn this guy away from the things of God because this guy wouldn't do his job. So you think this thing of discipleship is just that's the pastors, and I know they have that goofy conference he always asks us to go to, and they got a new guy all the time, and he's always talking about some new way of discipleship. And I know that goes through people's heads, but at the end of the day, guys, the paradigm is before you. If you choose not to do it, there's no equal ground here. There's no neutral ground where you can just say, I'm just going to stand on the sidelines. You can't, because He won't. He will disciple this guy if we don't. How many people are in your church like this that we're not touching? And how long before He gets to them? I mean, that's the danger. And what happens is we're busy with the college football and the Braves and the life and hanging out and doing all our stuff. Meanwhile, the casualty is this guy. And one day we're going to stand before Jesus and we're going to give an account, and He's going to say, "Hey, there was a simple man named so-and-so in your church. What did you do to disciple him?" I had a lot of stuff going on, and really, just to be honest with you, God, that wasn't my bag. I just wasn't into the discipleship thing. So therefore, God gets to let you know, "Oh, okay, well, Jay came along and discipled him for you." And that's why he's now out, and he's an atheist, and he's a this, and he's a that. All right? Now, Proverbs 1:22, "How long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity?" That's this guy. "The scorner's delight is in scorning, and the fool hateth knowledge." He delights in disobedience. You guys have all seen this guy. I mean, I see him in my own personal church. It's like You ever seen guys, you're just like, man, I think you just want to do wrong. It's like your goal. Whatever's right, you want to do the opposite. That's Jay right here. All right? Now, Ohio's going to come up here. And he's going to wear the shirt of a fool. Now, just as I said, the prudent man, remember, Psalms 19 says our job is to take the simple one and bring him into the land of wisdom. Now, if Christ has fulfilled or filled us with a mission to take this guy and take him into the land of wisdom, and he's going to use this guy to do it, what do you think Satan's doing? Just sitting around going, well, I guess I lost that one. No, he's going to take his discipler and he's going to lead this young man into the land of being a fool. Okay? Now hang with me. Watch this. Now, he says, here's his characteristics. One, he says there is no God. He mocks sin. Makes fun of it. All right? Slanders. He hides hatred. You ever been in church and someone, oh, hey, I love you. And about a week later, they stab you in the back. Right? That's a fool. Okay? His father is shamed. The guy that lives down here, it's an embarrassment to his father. Okay? Remember, discipleship is spiritual parenting. I understand we're talking about real physical parenting here in the book of Proverbs, but understand, let's make a spiritual application. And if we're not careful, we end up with some of our disciples, our disciplees down here. How embarrassing is that? I was just telling the lady here, and I was telling James earlier, I've had more failures as a discipler than I've had successes. I wish it wasn't. I wish I could stand here and go, oh no, I disciple 7, 8, 10 people a year, and they're all awesome, and they're all out doing the same thing. I've got the system down perfect. I don't. I want to be this guy. But sometimes I get real lazy. And what ends up happening is the simple guy ends up down here and I get embarrassed. I become a fool. Or I don't become a fool, but the fool embarrasses me because that's my spiritual children. All right? He has no delight in understanding. He doesn't want to learn anything. Okay? Now, so let's talk about this. Psalms 53 says, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. Right? Now, when we look at that verse, we think of atheism. Right? I mean, there is no God. Well, he's a fool. But let me ask you this. When somebody lives their life any way they want to, aren't they screaming, I'm living life how I want to. God doesn't have any jurisdiction over me. Even though they wouldn't come out and physically say there is no God, they live like there is no God. They live like, I'm not accountable for anything. Guys, if you understood, I just got done with about a 7-8 week series on the judgment seat of Christ in our church, and I said the scariest thought to every Christian should be the judgment seat of Christ. We think now that we're saved, I have nothing to worry about. No, you don't have hell to worry about, but you have something to worry about. One day you're going to stand eyeball to eyeball with Jesus Christ, and He says you're going to give an account for your life. Okay. Now, I've lived my life however I wanted to live it. I basically lived it like there was no God, like there was no accountability. And even though I would have never came out and said there wasn't a God, my actions screamed that there wasn't one. And that's what happens if we don't do our job. This guy ends up down there in the land of fools. And I cannot scream loud enough without making a fool of myself in here how important discipleship is. Because what you're seeing on these chairs is the dilemma we face every day. Because as we get up every day and go to church and do our thing, and listen, I'm a Southerner. I understand church and how it works. We think we go to church, check that one off the list. I don't miss Sunday school. I go to church. Man, I don't miss Wednesday night prayer meeting. I got it all down. Great. You discipling anybody? Well, no. Okay, then you're this guy lazy. You're not doing your job. You end up being Jay. And this guy ends up being Ohio. I mean, that's where it ends up. All right? All right? Yeah, nobody wants to end up in Ohio. All right? So number two, all right, He mocks sin. A fool mocks at sin. This is why, listen, guys, we have people in our church, lack discipleship, and they look at sin like it's no big deal. Okay? I still live in the world that premarital relations is a sin. But we live in a society that says, no, it's not that big of a deal. No, it's a huge deal. Okay? And we have people sitting in our buildings that go, nah, no big deal. You know why? It's easy for it to go, well, they're lost. They don't know Jesus. Well, maybe they are saved. Maybe they do know Jesus. They've just not been discipled and trained, and now they ended up in the land of a fool. Because we didn't take them when they were a blank sheet of paper and begin to write the words of God on their heart and get them over here in the land of wisdom. It's easy to go, well, they're just lost. Well, it may make your conscience feel better. No, the problem may not actually been them. The problem may be us because we're not reaching them. When they're simple, we're allowing Jay to come in as a scorner and lead them by their hand down into the land of a fool. All right? Proverbs 10:18. He that hideth hatred with lying lips, and he that uttereth a slander is a fool. You know all that gossip stuff in your church? That comes from these guys over here. And what they're going to do is train this guy to do the same thing. You want to eliminate gossip? Disciple. Train people. This guy covers shame. These guys talk about it. This guy goes, hey man, I know you messed up. This thing's between me and you. We're going to get this thing right with God. We're going to make sure it's taken care of. And we don't want you doing this anymore. You correct the guy and you go about your way. This guy comes along and goes, oh, did you hear about so-and-so? Let me tell you what he did. No, not only is it funny that he did it, but let me just go ahead and shame his name while we're doing it. All right? So, Proverbs 17:21. He that forgetteth a fool, he that begetteth a fool, doeth it in his sorrow, and the father of the fool hath no joy. Okay, remember when I said there was shame? He said, he that begetteth a fool. Remember, we're talking about what is discipleship? Spiritual parenting. What are we doing in our churches? We're begetting fools. Because we're a house full of scorners instead of a house full of prudent men. All right? That's what his job is, to make sure that he is bringing forth a person that can bring him joy. Now remember, this guy brings shame. What do you think this guy's going to do? All right? Now, Proverbs 18:2, a fool hath no delight in understanding. He doesn't want to know. No matter what you teach, how you teach. Listen, there are people that go to my church, and since I'm being recorded, hallelujah, they can find out. I'd say this if I was in my own pulpit. They don't care what I've got to say. They don't care. And Jesus himself could be brought in for a revival and stand up in our church and preach, and they still don't care. They don't want to know. You can sit here and talk about how awesome discipleship is. I've got people, I can visualize them, that have no interest in discipleship. They look at that and go, that's not for me. I'm not interested. Because they are fools. They have no delight in understanding. Because remember, they want to know Jesus as Savior. They don't want to know Him as Lord. They want to be free from the effects of sin eternally, but they don't want to be freed from the effects of sin presently. I say this at our church. Maybe you'll get it. I don't think they do. If you're sinning and not having a good time with it, you're doing it wrong. You understand what I'm saying? Sin has pleasure for a season. If you're sinning and not having a good time, you're definitely doing it wrong. Okay? That's what the draw and the allure is. Okay? So if you really want to serve God, you got to get down to understanding some things. And I want to understand you as my Lord. I want to understand you as my Father, and as you speak, I listen. That's what the relationship we want to get to. Now, let's talk about the wise guy. Hey, there's a guy back there in Georgia. I'm not a Georgia fan, but...
how does Georgia get to be wise over Alabama?
Hey, He's a wise guy.
That's what they're going to be asking next year.
Quiet back there. That guy in the back.
Yeah.
The wise guy always knew he was going to run. He was going to play for the national championship.
Yeah.
For my Auburn shirt.
So I have a question before
Okay.
you get to him.
Yeah.
So the fool and the scorner, I guess, since some of them might be saved, so you might get them into discipleship, but are they going to be quick to fall out?
Yeah, because
Maybe you can get some through there.
Yeah, because they're not wanting understanding. They're not wanting learning. They may go through discipleship because of the duty of, well, my church is doing it, others are doing it, I'm going to do it just so I can say I've done it. They may do it out of peer pressure. Others around me are doing it, so I'm going to do it. And a lot of times with the scorner and the fool, they're really good at hiding who they really are. And so you don't just see it off the top of the head. A lot of times these guys are some of your best servants. As crazy as that sounds. There are guys that, I've got guys that show up to every single event. And I can tell deep down inside, you're a scorner. I can just tell by your actions and how you do. You know, these guys don't go away. And what I do know is, remember, the whole time that Jesus is discipling, there's one guy in that group who is Satan in human flesh. And he knew it the whole time, but nobody else did. And the reason being is because when he said, one of you is a devil, you know what they said? Is it me? Is it me? Now you would think somebody would have said, oh, it's Judas. We were out healing the other day and he couldn't do it. I know it's Judas, but none of them said that. Matter of fact, he was the treasurer. So they had so much trust in him here. You hold the bag. You hold the money. And so the bottom line is these guys are really good at disguising who they really are. And if you're not careful, and I'm not saying they're lost. I think in our churches, we got a lot of people, because remember, getting saved has nothing to do with who you are. It's trusting in Jesus as your Savior. And I think most of these guys end up here because at one time, remember, these guys were sitting here. And what happened was he didn't do his job. So these guys, some other scorners come along and they reproduce themselves. And so Jay would have been trained and discipled by another scorner somewhere. And they end up in a land of a fool of saying, I'm going to live my life however I want to because, yeah, I know there's a God, but that doesn't apply to me. So, yes, my short answer is they're around. They're going to be discipled. That's why you got to be careful. One of my biggest fears in our church is, remember, Corinthians 1:10 says that we should all speak the same thing, that we have no division among us. So our goal is, whether I'm discipling somebody in our church or my associate pastor Brian's discipling, even though our methods may be a little different at times, we should be saying the same thing and we should be reproducing the exact same product. And what happens is, if we're not careful, we're allowing guys like Jay to come in and go, well, man, he's serving the Lord. We're going to allow him to disciple. The only problem is he's going to reproduce what he actually is. And so it's a dilemma. So let's talk about this wise guy down here on the end. All right? He shall inherit glory. Okay, and I'll talk more about that in just a second. Loves rebuke. Not just looks, accepting of it. He loves it. A wise individual wants to be corrected. Makes a glad father. Remember, this guy down here makes his father shame. This guy down here makes him glad. So if young man here ends up in life, if he's going to end up bringing his father shame or whether he's going to bring his father gladness, it will depend on these two guys doing their job. All right? Now, he wins souls. He refrains his lips. He listens to counsel. He departs from evil. Okay? This is what this guy does. And remember, Psalms 19, our job is to make wise the simple. In order to get this guy down to the land of wisdom, he needs a guide. He needs somebody to grab him by the hand and lead him down the path of wisdom. And that's where the prudent man comes in. So, number one, he inherits glory. Now, once again, I'm a Southerner. I'm from the Bible Belt with you guys. And we have been taught for so long, when we think of glory, we think of heaven. The only problem is, that's not how the word glory is used in the Scripture. Glory is not talking about someplace you go. It's talking about God actually honoring this man here on this planet. If you guys saw our song leader last night, Jeff Taylor, who leads our music, I've said this in front of him, is my hero. I literally want to be him. And the reason being is, he is one of two men that have came in my life. One of them is a retired deacon in our church who's still alive, but he's 80-something years old. He's retired. We let him basically do whatever he wants to do. And he's earned it. So at the end of the day, when I speak of them having glory, they have it right now. We look at these men and go, you can just see the presence of God on their life. You know, when Moses came down off the mountain and he was glowing, that's what we're talking about. You can see it in people who have wisdom, who have went from being a simple man, been guided into the land of wisdom. You can see the glory that God puts on them here. This is not some one day in the sweet by and by. No. God honors those men now. And so what happens is we look at people and we go, look, this guy's a fool and he brings shame. This guy's wise and he brings glory. And that's what happens is you end up in this place and people want to be like you. I mean, that's what happened to me. I'm 45. I pastor two men that I look at God and go, let me be more like those guys. I want to be that spiritual guy. By the way, news alert, pastor's not always the most spiritual guy in the building. Right? I know that's a shock, but not the case all the time. Number two, especially when they're a scorner. But Proverbs 9:8, reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Okay? Now, if you rebuke him, he'll love you. You rebuke him, he'll hate you. Now, I'm not going to get into the Proverbs 9:9, where he says, don't reprove him, then reprove him. Okay, we're to openly point him out at times. And the reason we're to openly point him out is so this guy sees it. You know, at times we realize I can't help this guy, but I can help the guy he's trying to affect by calling him out and saying, hey, you're wrong, and here's what the Bible says, and doing it publicly. Now remember, he's going to privately cover his shame. Our job at times is to publicly expose his. That's why you see that in church. Church discipline, which most of us don't do anymore, right, was designed for that very purpose. That if I openly rebuke that scorner in my church, then the simple will learn and go, oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, back to spiritual parenting. There was times in my house that when my kids were doing stuff and one of the kids got out of line, I would jerk that kid up, wear them out, sit them down with the other two sitting there. Now, what do you think the other two thought? Whoa. Now, they didn't get the discipline, but they learned from it going, don't do that, because the result is not good. So he loves rebuke. Number two, Proverbs 10:1, the Proverb of Solomon, a wise man maketh glad his father. That's the goal. We want to bring glory and we want to bring gladness. And if I'm a man who is discipling people, if I'm going to take a guy who is a simple man and lead him into the land of wisdom, it's going to bring gladness to my heart. You know, I was telling, what was really cool last night is Joe, who discipled James. James, as the pastor last night, was standing up, handling a service where Joe is going on to the next generation. And James was doing the presenting there last night. And I just thought that was so awesome to see that. Now, how do you think Joe feels? Here's a guy who James started out as a simple man, and Joe McCaig takes him, trains him, leads him into the land of wisdom. Do you think Joe sits around and goes, oh, that's embarrassing how bad James is? No. He looks at it and goes, I'm very proud of my spiritual son in the Lord. All right? Now, Proverbs 10:19, in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise. Back to the two men that are my heroes in my church. Do you know what they say? Not much. Neither one of them talk much. But when they talk, like E.F. Hutton, I listen. They don't say much. And people who are wise don't say much. They watch, they listen, they realize that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means you should listen twice as much as you talk. Right? My uncle, who was a Vietnam vet, taught me, I was raised by him, when it came to defending yourself in public, and we're talking about, physically fighting. He said, never worry about the guy running his mouth. That guy's trying to intimidate you. If you want to worry about somebody, worry about the quiet guy just sitting over there to the side. That guy is the guy who's got it figured out. Okay, well, you really want to see spiritually wise people? They don't say much. That's why I always say it's funny. The pastors never shut up, but the wise guys don't say much. Now, what's funny, because when I met James, I have to say this. I met James, I said, man, he does not say much at all. I was like, man, this guy's really got it going on. And Joe's response was, oh, no. Once you get him started, he don't ever be quiet. So, exact quote. All right, now, application. We're going to do this real quickly. Now that we've seen all these guys laid out, we're quickly going to show you the book of Proverbs. We're going to take 31 chapters. We're going to go through here. Nobody's getting that? Okay. Now, I'm just kidding. We're not doing 31 chapters. Now, watch this. Our job is to take this young man and bring him into the land of wisdom, right? That's Psalms 19, right? Look at Proverbs 1. You don't have to go there, but mark this down. We're not even going to get out of the first 4 verses. And the dynamic you see setting up here is sitting in front of you. He said, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel. He says, here's why I'm writing this. To know wisdom, to know instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instructions of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. He just told you the reason he wrote the book. To take this guy, give him wisdom and understanding and knowledge. Proverbs 1:5, a wise man will hear and will increase in learning. A man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsel. Verse 6, to understand a proverb and the interpretation, the word of the wise and their dark saying. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fool despiseth wisdom and instruction. Do you understand? We just went through the first 7 verses, and everything you see sitting in front of you is laid out. The book is not a bunch of thought bombs, individual little tweets. No, the book is literally going to take you through this paradigm sitting in front of you. It is discipleship. Okay, now watch. Don't do that. All right. Here, Proverbs 1:20, same chapter, first book. Wisdom crieth out. She uttereth her voice in the street. She crieth in the chief places of the concourse. In the opening of the gates, in the city, she uttereth her words, saying, how long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity? The scorner delighteth in scorning, the fool hateth knowledge. Now, I'm just showing you the paradigm. Look at verse 29, 33. We ain't even got out of chapter 1. Right? And they that hate knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, they would none of my counsel. They despise all my reproof. Therefore shall they eat the fruit of their own way and be filled with their own devices. For the turning away of the simple, that's this guy, shall slay them, and the prosperity of the fool shall destroy them. Okay? You can't turn away from this guy. It is your job. And I keep spitting on this kid. He's going to eventually turn around and hit me. All right? All right? Mark was talking about it last night. They are literally in front of me. All right? Now, so the bottom line is, if you just turn your back on him and you just go, I don't care. Discipleship ain't my thing. Are you good with this kid ending up down here? Because sit and do nothing, and that's where he's going to end up. That's where he's going to end up. And then we go, I don't know what happened. He just don't go to church no more. I can tell you what happened. We sat on our blessed assurance and did nothing. Why? He ended up over here because Jay guided him there. Now, chapter 2, verse 1 through 6. I just went through the first chapter. And we're only going to this point right here. I don't want to scare you with 31 chapters. All right? My son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom. That's this guy. That's our goal, to get the simple guy to listen. Right? He says, wisdom, apply thy heart to, look at the word, understanding. Yea, if thou criest after knowledge, and lifteth up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver and searchest for her as hidden treasure, then thou shalt understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of the mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. Do you think he has a theme here? Wisdom, understanding, knowledge. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Okay, what is discipleship? Okay, I'm going to show it to you in just 1 second here. Number one, it starts with knowledge. Now, I just told you in the last, hey guys, we got to be careful. We got to get them virtue. We got to understand. We got all that. I'm saying when it comes to guiding this guy to this guy over here, we're going to have to get him some knowledge. And here's what knowledge is. It's just the facts. Remember, when we're discipling, those 18 lessons at our church, they're not optional. If you're going to disciple, those 18 lessons have to be taught. Otherwise, we don't consider you discipling. Now, we are, as she does, meeting with individuals, talking about marriage, talking about life, talking about balancing a budget, doing a checkbook. I mean, all that stuff that young couples need. We're trying to teach that. But remember, we're doing that in the midst of this skeleton known as the 18 lessons because there's certain facts we want you to get. We want him to understand your baptism did not save you. We want you to understand what baptism is. It is a picture. We want you to understand that the fact is you have eternal security, and here's why. We want to get you some knowledge. We can't get you wisdom without knowledge. It's impossible. Okay, we got to get you the facts, and the facts are salvation. Now, Proverbs 1:7, beginning of knowledge, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. That's where that virtue comes in. All right, so we have the beginning of knowledge, but a fool despiseth wisdom and instruction. Heareth my word, the instruction of thy father. Now, Proverbs 12, whosoever loveth instructions loveth knowledge. Understand that knowledge and instructions go hand in hand. Right? So if I'm going to teach you about baptism and what it is, then I'm going to instruct you to be baptized. If I'm going to teach you about reading your Bible and the fact of how important it is, I have to instruct you on reading it and holding you accountable. Knowledge and instructions will go hand in hand. If you read the book of Proverbs with this paradigm, you're going to see every time knowledge shows up, instructions show up. Because they're together. Remember, my wife is teaching this young lady about the things of marriage. She's given her the facts, but she's also given her application, instructions. Right? Who cares that you learn a bunch of facts without application? Big deal. That's great for a Bible trivia game. It doesn't do anything for you when you go to work on Monday and the world's coming against you. That's right. You need some instructions. Now, understanding. So we have knowledge and instructions going together. And if knowledge is the facts, then understanding is the ability to translate the facts into meaning. That's what understanding is. So, I'm going to take this young man, I'm going to teach him a bunch of facts. 18 lessons, matter of fact, in our church. We're going to teach you those things. But what we're also going to be doing is teaching you some understanding, how to take these facts and put meaning behind them. Why is it important that we teach you eternal security? Well, because every one of us are going to struggle in our Christian walk at some time. And if you don't have that thing of eternal security down, you have this thing called doubt that rolls in. And when it does, it will render you useless. Okay? And so what happens is I need this young man not to just know the fact of what eternal security is. I need you to understand eternal security. You ever had a verse of the Bible, somebody asked you a question, you could go to the verse, but you couldn't explain the meaning behind the verse? In other words, well, I can show you in the Bible where it says it, I just don't understand it. Okay? And by the way, I'm 45, I'm pastoring. I had a guy call me the other day, he said, Pastor, I'm dealing with some college students, and they ask the question, if God is all-knowing, God is sovereign, and He knows everything before it's going to ever happen, why did He create Satan? Well, I can take you to Revelation that all things were created for His own glory. But I kind of wonder that myself. Don't you? Well, if you knew He was going to do it, why did you make Him? That's a good question to ask, by the way. So I can take you and give you the biblical answer. My question is, can I wrap my head around that biblical answer? And I'm not saying I have all the answers, guys, by the way, guys. And if you do, God bless you. The more I've studied the Bible, the more questions I have. All right? Now, so the knowledge is the facts. The understanding is the ability to translate that into meaning. Psalms 119, the entrance of thy word giveth light. It giveth understanding to the simple. It's not just the knowledge. Not just it's the understanding of what to do. It's not just in the instructions. Colossians 1:9, that you might be filled with the knowledge of His will in all wisdom. And look at this, spiritual understanding. This is where most discipleship breaks down. We can give you the facts, we can give you the 18 lessons, but are we really giving you understanding? All right, Proverbs 19:25, smite a scorner, and the simple will beware. Reprove one that has understanding, and he will understand knowledge. Listen, when he gets the understanding, he understands the facts. Now, wisdom, I'm closing right here. Wisdom. So, if knowledge is the facts, and understanding is the ability to make application of that, now we come into wisdom. Wisdom is knowing what to do with the knowledge and understanding. So now we've taught him a bunch of facts. He has understanding with it. Now does he know what to do with it? Remember, discipleship, the whole intent is not only are we leading him into the land of wisdom, his goal is to go out and lead others into the land of wisdom. So the question becomes, all this stuff we're giving you, you know what to do with it? I mean, I can pull a tool out from my shop, hand it to a young person and say, now that's a drill. Well, that's a fact. Okay, and that drill is for drilling holes. That's understanding. Wisdom is to know how to actually pick the drill up and use it. And every one of you men or ladies that know how to use tools understand exactly what I'm talking about. There's a difference between knowing what something is and knowing an understanding of what it does, but then there's a whole nother level called wisdom on actually knowing what to do with it. Can you use it? Okay, the goal is the Bible that you're being taught. You know what to do with it? Otherwise, we're just wasting time. We're just giving you a bunch of facts. Right? Now, wisdom is before him that hath understanding. All right, so we're going to stop there. The rest of the verses will be on my PowerPoint, but I want to give time for you guys to ask questions if you have any concerning this paradigm or even last lesson. So, anyone? All right?
Can you take the scorner and turn him back into the land of wisdom?
Yes. Yes. Yes, contingent upon the scorner wanting to learn. And it generally, what I've learned, is it takes an event in the scorner's life to get him back. Yep. Huh? Yes, Ruth from last night. I mean, you got all those events that led up to him leading back. Now, we had a lady come into our church a couple Wednesday nights ago, and I teach a class on that Wednesday night, and we have all kinds of events going on. I'm in a classroom teaching, and my wife comes walking in with this lady, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? And she's talking to us about all the problems that have befallen her. And one of the other ladies in our church, Linda, basically got up in her face and said, maybe your problem is, and all these issues is because you're outside the will of God, and God is trying to direct you in a certain way, and you're just not listening. And I'm sitting back going, oh, thank God Linda's here. I mean, because she is correcting that scorner quickly, but those events were hopefully being used to bring him back to reality. But in order to get him where he needs to be, it's going to be a stage. It's going to take him, he's going to have to come back to here first. And a lot of times we have to erase a lot of what's on his paper Anyone else? All right.